Alright, looking at chapter 1.6, we got 2 days of this, talking about multiplying and dividing real numbers. This lesson material is pretty simple. You're not going to change the way you multiply or divide. You are just going to learn how to incorporate negative signs into your answers. So let's just get into it. Thinking about the basic idea of multiplication and how you would model the multiplication of 3 times 2. And it would look something like this, to where you would simply take 3, create a rectangle of 3 by 2, so there's your 3 going across, and then here would be your 2 going down. So again, once you make your rectangle of 3 by 2, then what we did was we counted how many were in there. Again, you've got 1, 2, 3 going across, 2 going up and down. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that is why 3 times 2 is 6. Before I'm modeling multiplications with negatives, again, I first want to explain what the negative sign means. The negative sign literally means opposite of. So every time you see it, if you really want to translate what it means in statement, even a minus, it typically means opposite of. So because of this, you would value a 3, or you would model a 3 like this. All right, and that would represent the number 3. If you were going to model the value of negative 3, then what you would do is take each of these and take the opposite of that. And notice that each of these is red instead of yellow, and so that's what a negative 3 would look like. So again, a positive 3 or just a regular 3 would be yellow. The negative is when I take and flip them over and go from there. So again, notice the amount has not changed, but the negative sign just tells us to flip the number itself. So if we were going to model the problem for negative 4 times 2, that means we would look at something that has 4 going across and 2 going up and down. And once that is made, we understand that this number is, but again, what we notice now is, ignoring the sign, 4 times 2 is that, but this negative means take and change all these things once. So one negative means turn all these things over once. And whenever you do negative 4 times 2, because of that negative telling us to flip it over once, our answer is not positive 8, instead it is negative 8. So again, that's what the negative is going to do. So that one negative, which is what we're looking at, this isn't 4 negatives, this is just one negative in the problem, tells us to flip it over once, which means that our overall answer is going to be negative. What about a problem like negative 3 times negative 4? Again, the first thing you want to do is identify what 3 times 4 is. So we would look at 3 times 4 as something that has 3 going across, 4 going down, and we complete that rectangle. I'm sure you already know what the answer is in terms of what 3 times 4 is. If not, then you can just wait for a second while I finish this. And again, that is the model of negative, or at least 3 times 4. But again, when you look at this, there are now 2 negatives in this problem. And because of those 2 negatives, it tells us to flip it twice. So it means take this and flip it once and then flip it again. And you notice what happens when I flip it again. If I take all these things and flip them over 2 times, because that's what the 2 negatives are telling me to do, every time you flip it, the first time goes to negative, the second time goes back to positive. It's why the answer of this is a positive 12. So again, when it comes to your negatives in multiplication and division, that is generally the idea that you're going to have when it comes to it. So the overall idea for this, multiply or divide while ignoring the signs to get your number. Then count your negatives, and again, the negatives aren't the numbers that are attached, it's just the actual number of negatives. I see 1, 2 negatives in this one. I can see 1 negative in that one. So again, when you literally count your negatives and get that number, and that will tell you whether it's positive or negative. Look at the relationship here. So again, 1 negative means it starts like this. You flip it over once, it's going to be a negative answer. 2 negatives, if you started like this and you flipped it over once and then flipped it over again, notice it went from negative back to positive. 3 negatives, again, starting here, flipped once, flipped twice, flipped 3 times, is going to be negative. And then 4 negatives, of course. First one goes negative, the second flip is positive, third flip is negative, and the fourth flip is back to positive. And that is the general relationship that you have. You won't really be getting into higher numbers until next year. So just make sure you understand that 1 negative flips over once to make negative, and once you flip it again, it turns back to positive, and that pattern continues on for as many times as you need to do it. So before we go on to Math Excel, let's take a real quick look at what they're going to be requesting, some of those personal questions that I like to ask to make sure you're thinking. You're going to see a problem like this. It's going to say consider the problem 6 times -8. It's going to say how many negatives are there. And so again, it's not 8 negatives, there is just 1. So you put the number 1 there. Will the answer be negative or positive? Again, with 1 negative, it means it flips it over and becomes negative. You do not need to spell out the word negative. You can just put a negative sign there. And then the final answer, first off, 6 times 8 is 48. And you said the answer is negative, so the answer would be negative 48. And that's all it's going to ask you to do on the quiz. That's all it's going to ask you to do on the Math Excel for the day as you practice it. Considering this problem, again, it's just going to give you a question here. It's going to say how many negatives are there. That means take the time to count. 1, 2 negatives. So just put that down. Will the answer be negative or positive? Again, multiplication and division work the same way, which means that if there are 2 negatives, you imagine flipping this over twice. There's 1 flip, there's another flip. That means it's going to be positive. Again, just put a plus sign there. And then what is the final answer? Well, 72 divided by 9 is 8, and it's going to be a positive 8. You do not need to put a plus 8, but a positive 8 is all you need to write. So go ahead and get to your Math Excel. Again, I'm trying to leave you a lot of time in class to do this. Make sure you practice the way you're supposed to. Again, some of you did not do so well on your quiz last week, but it's probably because you didn't practice in class, and the quiz is just like the questions in class. So if you want to do well, you need to make sure you keep practicing and keep asking questions and keep moving forward. But other than that, good luck, and again, use this time to work together, to ask teachers for assistance, and to get better at this stuff. Good luck.